Radio Network.
Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free. Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free.
Oh, hey guys. Hey Ramon, how you doing, man? Happy Saturday the 14th, right?
Something like that. Well, it's actually Sunday the 15th for me, so.
So, how was your Friday the 13th?
I forgot all about it.
Did you really? I did
Yeah.
too. I did too actually until this morning, Saturday the 14th. I was like, "Oh, wow, yesterday was Friday the 13th."
Which actually I think it's a good thing because I've heard a lot of people say how just, giving it energy just draws in the negative stuff from that people have given it because supposedly they can't really find a basis for it.
It's superstition. There's superstition is a powerful thing, Ramon. There's, and you mentioned it, adding that power to that sort of thing is, can do a lot of things. Like, I've been talking a lot lately about how we project with our voice into the world, into the cosmos, and the universe responds. And we project our thoughts and the universe responds. And, think about it. It's not rocket science, You projecting that fear of walking under a ladder, the Chicken Little, the sky is falling thing.
Is it? Oh, no. Okay. So, yeah, it's funny because a friend of mine, he woke up, it's usually I'm like, 12, 13 hours ahead of you guys. And I'm looking at Facebook and he puts a picture. It's like Friday the 13th and his car, somebody must have hit the side window, the little side window and took it right off. He was like, happy Friday the 13th. Yeah.
So, by the way, you guys are listening to Tom and Ramon on the 100th Monkey Radio.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Friday or Saturday the 14th.
Yeah. So, should we jump right into it? Because we have an amazing guest back with us.
What? Oh, I'm sorry, Ramon. What's that?
Wow.
Yeah, I was sidetracked for a moment.
I said we have an amazing guest back with us. While Tom gets his marbles together, you can check us out at www.hundredthmonkeyradio.com. And we also do a pre-recorded show that we release every Sunday. So there you can go and check out a bunch of people. And hello to everybody in the chat world. Thank you for joining us. We'll be giving the numbers out a little later, but I'll give it to you now.
So, Ramon, you just contradicted yourself.
Yeah.
Giving them out later, but I'll give them out now.
Well, humans do that really good. I don't.
It's actually real easy. I can remember this one now, Ramon.
Oh, go ahead.
1-866-37-TRUTH. 1-866-37-TRUTH. That's easy, right?
Yeah. What was it again?
God.
Right. So who do we have?
Oh, we had this guy on our other show here last week, and Ramon and I were just absolutely impressed with what he brought to the table, the intuition and the knowledge of areas that me personally I haven't really delved into real deeply. But man, this guy is an absolute fountain of knowledge, and I'm not going to go into his bio here. If you guys want to check out the bio, I read through it on our other show, and you're welcome to go over there or to the website and just read it up. It's pretty. He's had quite an interesting life. He's done a lot of meditation work and teaching, and he is the husband of Lisa Royale, and we had her on the show also. Actually, we had her on the Truth Frequency too, didn't we, Ramon?
No, no, we didn't get a chance to get her on the True Frequency. She's
Well-
a very, very busy woman.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio live edition, Ron Holt.
Well, thank you, Tom and Ramon. Thanks for inviting me to come on again. It was a very wonderful experience chatting with you guys in the last episode. So I hope we can have some more really good topics to share.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the one story. I don't know if we want to jump right into the.
Actually, let's start somewhere else, Ramon. We'll get to that here later. Ron, you heard us talking about superstition in Friday the 13th. I'd kind of like to get your views on superstition and what it's all about on this planet.
Well,
This is out there in left field, right?
yeah. I liked how you guys were addressing it from the perspective of that what we put out there comes back to us. There is an element of truth in that, and but there's also a lot of other factors that kind of mitigate exactly what comes back to us. I mean, there's a lot of grace that's involved in that kind of in that kind of line of thought. But as far as superstition goes for Friday the 13th, for myself, just as a side note, Friday the 13th has always been kind of a good luck day, so I never fell into convention with that. I never felt like I had to toe that kind of a belief system. So it just never really appealed to me. So the different things just happened for me on Friday the 13th.
Yeah. I'm right in line with you there, Ron. I mean, me for Friday the 13th, I've always actually had just the opposite, which is if anything, it's been better luck on those days. And I really haven't known anybody that had really bad luck on Friday the 13th. So, I don't know. I mean, you hear people's stories and stuff, but no, I've never had any issues at all. But I mean, you can get those kind of horror stories any day of the week.
Sure. And the danger is that when we have an unfortunate circumstance, we with kind of blinders on, we kind of let's say make a determination about it. And then from that determination, we look for it's almost like the Rorschach. So
Right.
Once you start seeing it, then you can start adding to it and only accentuating one aspect until it builds up and it becomes like a snowball. It has its own momentum. So that's one thing I think
Yep. I think that's the creative process right there, right?
Excuse me, say that again?
That's the creative process right there, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. And that, we're kind of very, as far as, if we pull back a little to that last conversations we had in the last show, where we were talking about consciousness, well, we're kind of free. And when we start endorsing certain belief systems, then they can start to compound on themselves until we take the time to really see them clearly, take them apart, and then free ourselves from the mechanics of that in operation, that kind of consciousness in operation. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense because for me, I've been like covering for this person at my job who went back to the States and then was having some issues and with her visa, and then ends up that she just ended up finding a different job to cover her visa. And during the whole time, I just kept saying to myself, how good can it get? How good can it get? In the sense of like, because it's something steady, and I was just covering this, and then I was going to go look for something else, but then just end up, instead of having one day, now having 3 days. So yeah, I see exactly what you mean by you know, I've always believed that if you start, not always, but recently I started believing stronger that instead of saying, oh, today is like Friday the 13th, you have to be careful, you're more like, today is Friday the 13th, how good can it get?
Nice.
You know?
There you go.
But my question to you is there any date, or maybe because of the date, we've like thinned the veils, like for example, you know, October the 31st or Friday the 13th or any other day that the veils might be a little thinner than usual, even though they are getting thinner and thinner, but just those specific days?
I think they are, and two that really come up right off the top of my head is the equinoxes. Those days seems to be a very important day for consciousness, where the veils do tend to be thinner. And, you know, if we look at the metaphor of, let's say, the spring equinox, on that day, the sun begins to shine its first ray onto the planet. And in the metaphoric example, it expresses a duality, it expresses the dualist metaphor. And so on that moment, let's say the great creator is looking into the void, and let's say his eye comes up over the horizon of the void and peers into the darkness. And where the light of the creator's eye shines into the darkness, there the universe gets started, and all things start to begin in their manifestation, in their cycles and seasons. So on the day of the equinox, we have a metaphoric example of that moment in creation when the creator looked in and the cycles began. And so on that day, that veil is very thin because creation process begins, and as we've seen in many traditions around the world, we have the return of all the let's say the Devic kingdoms with their elves, gnomes, and so on and so forth. Those start to return and bring creation, bring life back to the fields and to the plants and to the germination and creation through the physical reality. So we have a moment in time where that veil is very, very thin.
You know, me, I've been, I think I mentioned in the last show that, you know, energy in me, I have a tendency to, I can sense this stuff pretty good, you know, especially the conscious, you know, that conscious field. And what I've been personally noticing as we near this equinox in particular, and, you know, this is a new phenomena for me personally for what's going on, you know, since the last year, you know, the growth I've had in the last year. But the energy seems to be, I mean, I'm getting more and more and more up, and it feels like I'm more balanced, but then I'll come into this funk for a couple of days, and I'm trying to figure out this energy that has just come in, and when I get through these things, it's like I'm come out of them higher, you know, just naturally higher on life, you know. So I'm just curious. Do you think that's a phenomena of the you know, the equinox itself, coming up on that equinox itself? Maybe sensing that energy building to that balance point. Like I say, this is a sort of a new phenomena for me. So I'm trying to understand it for myself.
Well, it's great that you're noticing ever more subtle changes in your energetics, and at the moment that you release or process, have time to make space inside, then you're feeling much more stable, centered, and so on, but the process continues on. So it's great that that's become such an acuity for you. And to answer your question, I would say that there are cycles within cycles within cycles. So in our last interview, we had talked about a greater cycle of being under the galactic disk,
Right.
and how that operates kind of like a logarithmic spiral, in that in the beginning, as we crossed over into the underside where things are separated and more more separated in their consciousness and their expression, it takes a long time before you start to see changes. So as we get closer to this 2012 point, which we've already crossed, we've been noticing how it's been speeding up quite quickly, and that whole process kind of acts as a centrifuge. Got it this time. The centrifuge aspect has us really processing at super speeds, and things are starting to move back into natural order, so they have their own density and weight, so they have their own stratifications. They've been asunder, and since they've been asunder, they've been all mixed up, and they've been left inside of us to untangle. And now that the process of untangling has increased our greater clarity, like the process of a diamond, is making more space inside of us to pull the fabric of unconsciousness out from the fabric of consciousness, making space and alignment for clarity and our natural spirit. Our natural spirit is one that is fulfilled, happy, centered, and so on. So as the fabric is being pulled away by this natural timing and the natural cycles that are taking place, we see smaller cycles, like in the cycles of the seasons,
Right.
and they help augment this alignment process, integration process, so that we can come into greater clarity inside of us. Then more of the reality around us fits inside of us comfortably in a non-polarized, non-antagonistic way. Because before that, it comes out, the dynamics come out as highly polarized, so we have to take care of our own charges. So I have to agree with you very much on this subject. We get to see that the planets and the solar system and the galactic system all working in tune with each other to help us through this process, as long as we're willing to face. And if we're not willing to face the unprocessed parts of ourselves, then nature kind of gives us a hand at kind of tugging the carpet from under our feet, so to speak.
Right, right.
Tugging or just slapping us? Tugging would be nice.
Whatever's necessary.
That was a metaphoric tugging.
Yeah.
He didn't tell you that they're using a 2x4 to tug at you with.
I felt that sometimes in the back and the front of the head.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So that exact thing's been on the table for so many people now. That going inside and making room, like you said. I really like the way you put that, making room for grace, for your true potential to come online. I definitely like the way you said that. But that seems to be on the table for a lot of people. And, us being 100th Monkey Radio, right? We're all about that unity consciousness, that conscious field, and how we use and interface with that and how it affects us. What we see out here in the world, from that effect. And I'm just curious if if you have actually seen that 100th monkey effect in play in the conscious realms.
Oh, absolutely. And I just loved the title of your radio program, radio station, because it is so apropos. Now, each of us plays such a dramatic and important part in this facing and clearing process. It's huge. It's dramatically huge. So every step that we take on the path towards processing our own polarizations, those things that make us feel the most contracted under pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, anger, grief, rage, those things, and how we use those things against ourselves to make us even more guilty. It's almost like once we enact it, once we use it, then we turn around, and that's not enough. We got to self-sabotage ourselves with this, so we've got to kind of keep stabbing ourselves with these things. Well, this is where the great wake-up is being called into the forefront. So each of us that becomes aware of this, because in our last radio show we were talking about how in sacred geometry we have the holographic and the fractal principle, and we briefly went over how if the unity consciousness, the oneness, the unicity of life, if that is consciousness, then it is holographic and it is fractal. And so it acts like a hologram. And so when we take a hologram and shatter it into billions of pieces, no matter which piece it is, it contains the entire whole. And so when we see ourselves as a sherd of that hologram, then we can start to make some really radical realizations. And those realizations are that as you, a sherd of the hologram, become aware of what is really self-limiting, which is yourself. It's your own belief system. It's your own polarizations that cause you the pain, shame, blame, fear, guilt, rage, grief, and so on. So if you see those things as they flag up, and they flag up in the dualities of life, we polarize the dualities. Well, if you see through it, every time you see through your own delusion, and they come from when we were unconscious, like we were children. When we were children and we made these rash determinations about the reality, when we faced overwhelming situations, we polarized them at that time with the lack of understanding that we carried. So when we go back to that point, reparent, so to speak, and reevaluate the determinations that keep returning to us, and we free ourselves from it by seeing more of the whole picture. This is the basis of all spiritual traditions. First, we go through the stilling of the mind, stilling of the emotions, stilling of the body, until we can see clearly. Then our work begins at the seeing clearly, because then we can see through the polarizations and the dramatizations that we placed upon life and circumstances in life. Well, when we do just one, since we are a hologram of consciousness, that gets imparted into all holograms. So every time, let's just say, I face one fear and see through it clearly, ending my polarized karma drama, then what happens is I free myself. there is no freedom unless you see clearly. There's just the endless drama reciting itself in different ways until we do wake up. When the pain the pain and suffering nearly equals the level of resistance we have to looking at it clearly, then we have the opportunity for awakening and liberation. So as it keeps repeating itself, and finally we stop and say, I've tried billions of ways to fix this thing. Now I'm just going to look at it clearly. I need to see more into this. And when you do, holographically, you send that to every part of yourself in all of creation. Because literally, you are all the sand, all the atoms in the hearts of every being, in the hearts of all the stars and planets and so on. So you send it systemically throughout all things. And this is what helps germinate the diamond frequency. And that diamond sees through all polarizations.
Hold on, we're coming up on the break, and I want you to hold on to that thought, because this is like really good stuff, and this is why we invited you back. You're listening to the 100th Monkey Radio Show with Tom and Ramon, and we'll be back with our guest, Ronald Holt, and make sure you stay tuned. We're waiting for that little music to start there.
It's probably there. We just get her.
I was just gonna make you sing then.
It's let's see, solischool.com is Ron's website. SOLISCHOOL.com.
That's correct. solischool.org.
All
right.
Okay, we're out of there.
Ups.com. On your way through this hard venture, you will be tested.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
Now one more time before I go, one last thing you need to know, my friend. You want to keep it complicated, it's really all quite simple in the end. You got to tune into your inner being, now let it be. You got to activate your inner vision, now let it see.
Well, welcome back to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ramon, and we have Ronald Holt with us. Holt, stop. Ronald Holt. And hey, Ron, before we get going back into the conversation, if you would let the listeners know what exactly do you do, and what do you got going on at solischool.org?
Well, I used to run a spiritual organization for, about 17 years, and I finished with the contract with that. And my wife and I, she helped me run the organization. Well, now, since we're free from our contract, we've started a new school, which is called www.solischool.org. That's our website, and it actually means Seed of Life Institute. Through the course of the work that we did over these last 17 years and working together, we started seeing that, let's say that there was a lot of focus on meditation tools, and there seemed to be even an over stimulation or over emphasis on the meditation tool. And what we wanted to do, since we had our fingers in not only Taoist yoga, but we also were in Hatha yoga, and we've been going to the monasteries in Korea and making frequent trips all over the world. We started noticing that a lot of people seem to not include the body in their spiritual training. So what we wanted to do was come up with methodologies and information that took the higher principles and applied them in addition to working with the body. As the Taoists say, you can throughout the entire universe, the only place for integration in all of the universe is right here in your own body. And so we looked at that aspect, and we began to realize what the masters were saying were true, in that you can't change the mind with the mind, you can't change the emotions with the mind, but you can change the mind and the emotions with the body to a very nice degree. And eventually, when one sees the difference between mind and consciousness, which is a huge difference, then all things can be done from the consciousness. But there has to be that radical step. So anyway, we put together a lot of this material, and we've created some workshops and some materials to go along with those workshops to help the student really begin to empower themselves from the standpoint that you already are perfect. However, clear seeing can be a very effective addition to what you're doing. And so we emphasize a lot of what the higher principles and the ancient teachings of yoga and Hatha yoga and Taoist yoga combined together with sacred geometry. And that's really a unique, we think it's a very unique slant into the New Age venue.
Right. So that's great. So you got anything coming up real soon? I know you're doing some workshops and stuff coming up here in Japan.
Yes, I've got a workshop on awakening the true self, which goes over a lot of what we were just talking about and some of what we were talking about in the first interview. And it's going to be held in Japan, in Tokyo, November 2nd through the 6th. And it's going to be English and Japanese translated. And if you're interested, you can go to the Japanese website, since they're hosting it, www.naturalspirit.co.jp. Cool. So that's naturalspirit.co.jp.
Cool. Okay, well, I know we just started talking about the diamond body right before that last break, and before we jump into that, I got a question on some of the stuff that you've already talked about. You know, that's awesome that people are able to find the space to be able to go inside and make these changes and change their perception of what they're experiencing in the world, you know, what they perceive as the external world. I mean, that is just great. I mean, in the world that we live in today, that people are able to do that. What I've noticed, and something that you know, I'm curious on how you see this is rectified, is when we look out into the world and we look at our history, and the tremendous amount of tragedy and horror and just absolute destruction in the last century on this planet. I mean, all the lives that have been lost in such horrendous ways. And then we look out in the world today and what's happening right now. You know, we got all this crap going on in the Middle East. You know, our political system is in shambles. Our healthcare is in shambles. I mean, we're all, you know, strung out on pharmaceuticals and antidepressants and antipsychotics and you know, you name it. I mean, how do we rectify that, and that stuff that we perceive as being absolutely crap out there in the world, and still be able to go inside and do this work and find that place?
Well, one step at a time. It's a huge dichotomy that you're speaking about. Yet all of us face this all the time in the headlines, the news, and in the walking around in the world. We see this in the jobs, in the relationships. We see it everywhere. The just absolute, utter challenge of being alive and the dramas that take place. Well, there's a, in the, imagine a world that, first of all, we started to see clearly, and imagine that all the dramas that we face that have such utter ripping impressions upon us. Imagine for a moment that we saw through them clearly and where they instigate. Now, it's kind of hard to do because we have had the dramas gone on for so long, so the level of clarity is muddled by the cycles of the drama. So-and-so did this to me, and so I've got to do this. I feel justified. I feel, it just goes on and on and on. It is the wheel of karmic reactions. So basically what you're asking then is this, looking at this huge wheel of karma going on in the world, and it's playing itself out in such utter diversity. Yet all of the teachings, when we go back deep into the teachings, into the higher principles, we constantly run up against everything is perfect, just as it is. Yet the discerning mind looks out at all of these cycles and dramas and things that are going on, and certainly can find reason to be at odds with it. Well, imagine a world where we took off our polarizations, our lens that we see inaccurately, and we begin our process of projection onto the world. So it's very easy to see then from the beginning, when we've entered into this reality of sleep consciousness, even though our eyes were open, they couldn't see, and our ears, they could hear, but they really couldn't understand. Well, when we looked out at the world, we responded to the dramas with our own lens, tainted lens of polarized reactions. Imagine a world if we took the polarizations, the charge, all the charges that we have that are built up with anger, shame, blame, guilt, grief, rage, whatever. Let's say we took that charge out. We no longer had that charge. How would you treat the person next to you? How would you look at the world? How would you look at the political system, and so on? So for me, when I'm looking out at the world and I'm trying to understand from the spiritual perspective how these great teachings tell us everything is perfect, everything is being meted out, all the dramas, all these circumstances are exactly what should take place. Everything is perfect. Now that's really, really hard to do. Right. Unless we're willing to really look at ourselves and how we add to the stimuli out there. So instead of reacting, and reaction in the definition, a reaction is an unconscious response to a challenge or a condition. Whereas an enlightened or an awakened or a conscious response is labeled as a response. So you're seeing how things are polarized, how you look at it polarized, and you're choosing to look at even with greater magnifying lens at the stimuli and own all of our own projections on the situation. Now, this is very hard to justify, but here's the thing. The world has not really looked at clearly what inflames the situations that we get brought up against, what we face. When we look at the needs of the ego and the mind, ego, and false sense of self, these kind of three aspects, they work together and they have their needs. Number one on their needs is safety, security, convenience. Number two on their needs is control. And number three is validation and recognition. Once they get those first three, then they start looking for the next four. The next four, which makes seven, is they look for entitlement, entitlement, judgment, comparison, and expectation. Those four things, if you look at them closely, they're kind of like a monkey reaching into a shallow-necked vase and reaching for the apple inside of the slim-necked vase. Its hand can just make it in. Once it grabs the apple, it can't get its hand out. So if you look at those seven things, they're actually kind of the same thing. They're like that apple. Once you think you got a hold of something and you start pulling your hand out, you find you're trapped by your own sense of entitlement, by your own expectation, by your own judgment, by your own comparison, and by your need for convenience, safety and security, and recognition and control.
Right.
Well, if we can look at those things clearly and see how we engage them, we start to see they are black holes. They are false. So when we... Here's the thing. Meditation leads us to the point of clear seeing. Meditation leads us to the neutral observer, and neutral observer leads us to clear seeing. In that state, we are fulfilled, we are complete, we are in the nothingness. We have no definition because we become non-local. Well, in that state is where we grow. We talked about the crystal, the salt crystal, and how it grows. And if we let it grow slowly over time, then we come up with a large crystal. If we try to, get it to grow quickly, we wind up with a very small crystal. Well, when we're in that neutral state, in that neutral observer, our crystal grows quickly, and we get to feel ourselves in the expanse beyond, without the entitlement, expectation, judgment, comparison, and those safety and security and comparison, so on. And in that way, we start to take away our stimuli into the cycle of drama and karma.
Right. I got a question here. I feel that I've come a long ways in the last few years as far as the way I personally perceive the world, and I think I'm actually able to see most things fairly clearly. But once in a while, something will happen. Something will come along that I just can't see in that same way. I mean, whether it's too horrendous or for whatever reason, there's the full spectrum of reasons it could be. But something that comes up and says, I'm in your face. You know, I'm just trying to understand some of these anomalies that pop up that say you can't ignore me. I'm going to hit you on your emotional body. I'm going to hit you on your physical body. I'm going to hit you. You know, you're going to be racked with sobbing, with tears, whatever it happens to be. But it hits you on all levels. You know, mind, spirit, and body. And but on the other hand, I'm able to look out at everything else. You know, just as horrendous or even more so horrendous than this one thing that's just in my face. It's like, what do I do with this?
Good question. A lot of our stimuli comes from unprocessed, as we've talked about already, unprocessed and unresolved issues. And they kind of create like a bubble or a balloon inside of us, and every time we face something similar to it, we kind of add more charge to it. And sometimes when the season or the setting is correct, I don't know, maybe it's the biorhythms or something, but one of those balloons comes up, one of those bubbles comes up, and just like you said, it hits you square in the face, and it hits you from all angles, and you can't escape it. You feel absolutely contracted under the weight of all of this stuff. What can you do then when you're under that level of contraction and it hurts? Well, one thing is to remember you have an unbreakable connection to that neutral observer, and that's the integrated energy. And that integrated energy you sense in your meditation. If you can get to that, knowing that it's there, you begin to take like a 64, I call it the 60-40 posture. It's almost like in martial arts where you put most of your weight on the back leg during certain situations, and sometimes you put more weight on the front leg during certain situations. Well, in this case, if you were to put 60% of your awareness on that inner connection to your neutral observer, to that integrated energy inside of you, and 40%, maybe even 30, start off with a lower percentage, but as you're standing in that centeredness, bring it into the meditation with you, bring your embrace around it, the embrace of the heart, the embrace of the mind, in that non-judging state, and let it rend itself, let it speak itself, let the charge out. And, you know, the first part of it's not going to be pretty, and it's going to come in so many different currents that it's going to be very confusing. Just stay centered and embracing it all. That will die down. You may have to take several vantages into it. In other words, you may have to take several opportunities to engage it. But when these things are ripe, they come up, and it's almost like you can't avoid them.
Yeah.
So,
Ron, could this be like something that has to take a physical action? You know, say it's something that's within your realm of influence. It's something that's called for you to take action upon, to be able to.
yes, it does oftentimes come up. It can come up as a physical action, and you will know because when you're inside, let's say you're inside of your meditation in that neutral observer, and you get this rush and knowingness that you got to do something. I mean, it's very apparent. And so you do. It's not coming from the mind. It's coming from, let's say, your holistic being. So you go and you do and you step back. I think the adage that we see in the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita, you have the right to action, but to the fruits of your action, you have no right to. So we have the right to action. So do what comes over you in that pure sense in trying to handle your situation. Stand, whatever that means, stand up, take whatever action is most appropriate, and then step back and let it go, because it's in the Creator's hand, and the Creator inspires us in the moment to do things. And that is what leads to like this freedom that's kind of a paradox, because the paradox is kind of like the feeling is the unbearable lightness of being. So you do it, make your action, you do the best you can, and you step back and give it back into the Creator's hand. You've done the best you can. You're not, the outcome does concern you. You're observing it, but that outcome is not yours. And this way you can disengage in a holistic way, rather than being obsessed. And then entitlement, judgment, expectation, and so on, those things start feeding into the equation, and they tie you into the monkey paradox of trying to take the hand out of the vase by gripping the apple. Let go of the apple. Do what you're supposed to do in that moment and let go. That's the important thing. And when we look at the outer world, it's so hard for us looking at the outer world and seeing things we absolutely love in peril. If you're being called to a perilous situation to make an action, well, do it 10,000%.
Right.
Then the equation is, can you let go? After you've done your best, can you let go?
Right.
And this is where most of us get caught, is we're caught up in the result. The result's not yours.
Right. Very nice. Very nice. So we just got a couple minutes for our next break, and maybe I'll lay this out for food for thought during the break, so you can come back and blast us. I personally have noticed that my world it reacts to me tremendously, and it feels like at times it's completely alive. And I mean, I'm just curious on how you see the level of consciousness and sentience within the cosmos, within the God, within the planet Earth, within all these the planetary bodies, all the different planetary bodies out there, the different stars, the different galaxies, all that sort of thing. So this should be a good one. I'm really actually anticipating hearing what you have to say about it. So you're listening to Tom and Ramon on the Hundredth Monkey Radio, and you guys, just a couple little quick updates. If you guys want to call in this next hour, phone number is 1-866-37-TRUTH, and we will field your questions to Ron as they come in. That'd be awesome. Ramon, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Sorry, I kind of took over that segment.
No problem. Yeah. So, some of the other stuff, once again, our website is www.thehundredthmonkeyradio.com, and you can find us on Facebook. Just put in the 100th Monkey Radio, and we'll pop right up. So, waiting for the music to start. There we go. See you guys in a few.
Exposing the hate and exploring the love. This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free. Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free.
Welcome back. Oh, go ahead, Ramon.
Welcome back to the 100th Monkey Radio Show with Tom and Ramon. Tom?
So Ron, question I asked before the break: is it all alive?
I think a story here would probably help illustrate how lively it can be, and that is, I think it was 1994. Excuse me. I was in Hong Kong, and I was with one of my friends, and we went. I think it was Pacific Plaza. I think that was the name of it. Anyway, inside of this mall, they have, it's an enormous mall, many, many stories high. And inside of it, in the food court, you can see all the way up the many, many stories. So it's like a high overhead there. Really beautiful place. So we were sitting down to have lunch. And the waiter came up, and he took our order, and then he walked away. And as he walked away, just out of the blue, and we weren't on anything, we were straight, and out of the blue, the top of the Pacific Plaza, it wasn't there. It was the galaxy. And we felt we began to look at each other like, oh my God, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And we, yes, I'm seeing exactly. Are you seeing the roof is gone? And there's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm seeing too. And so we started looking at it, and the waiter must have thought we were on some kind of drugs or something, because it was just so phenomenal to us, and we were not holding back. We were so amazed that it was just happening. And then the next thing, we started to experience ourselves moving towards the galaxy. And as we were moving towards the galaxy, of course, the excitement's building because we're both experiencing the same thing. We could talk about it, but yet we were still in our seats. But everything in our senses showed us we were moving towards the galaxy. And as we got closer to the galaxy, all the stars in that galaxy became eyes. And all those eyes were looking at us, and suddenly we could feel all those eyes looking out through our eyes at the same time we were looking through all those eyes looking at us coming to the galaxy. And, this really illustrated how everything is just consciousness. And we are a part of all of that, and all of it sees through all of itself all the time. We just get distracted away from it. So,
what about that individuated consciousness, the sentience of, say, the planetary bodies? Earth, the moon, the stars.
In my experience, and my through meditations and interactions with the planets and the stars, they are totally alive. They are totally sentient, and they're so benevolent, and they are so gentle at nudging us towards our greater awakening, outside of the bonds and limitations of the illusion that the mind, ego, and false self keeps us. It's doing its job by doing this, but not that it's doing anything wrong. It's actually supposed to be doing exactly what it's doing and having us unfold right at the right timing. And as I said earlier, when the level of pain and suffering nearly equals the level of resistance we have to seeing clearly and awakening, then an opportunity arises for us to see clearly and liberate from the delusion or the illusion of our pain and suffering.
Right. Are we causing pain to the planet? Is Gaia feeling any pain from from the process?
Well, there's a yay and a nay in there. And this is kind of hard to explain. This might be kind of radical, so I'm just going to kind of say it. in the illusion, and you really have to lay down a bit of work to really get this, but at the same time that we were created inside of the manifested reality. So inside of, in Hindu it's called Prakriti, inside of Prakriti, inside of the void, as what others call this space, inside of the void, when the Creator projected light into the void, this is the moment where dualities begin, because the pulling apart of the marriage of paradox happens, and it becomes dualistic in nature. So at that point, we have a dualism in our own being. We have the false self and the true self, to put it in a general context. The false self, its job is to try to keep you asleep. The true self, its job is to slowly awaken in time. And so the true self is kind of like a crystal ball. And that crystal ball is consciousness. And whatever you put that crystal ball in, be it mud, be it water, or be it sunshine, it reflects exactly what it's in. So if it's in sleepiness, then it's going to be in that darkened mode. At any rate, it cannot be marred, it cannot be killed, it cannot be destroyed, it cannot be scratched. It's perfect. However, what we see becomes the problem. Okay, so we have that consciousness and we have the false self. The false self is the one that has the wounds, carries the wounds, because it is not a complete being. It is an illusion. It is a shadow. In the Yoga Sutras, it says, Book 2, Sutra 6, Purusha, which is the unicity, the oneness, the great unicity of life, the oneness of life projected on the mind is the ego. So the reflected self has the wounds. Those wounds really cannot be healed because they're holes. They're because it's not a true being. It has holes. It has wounds. So, same like the earth. The earth has a dualistic part. Yes, part of it is being hurt. Part of it, we can see the damage. We can, we hear the prophecies from the indigenous ones. We hear the cries of Mother Earth, and there is an aspect of that that's going through its challenges, having these children on the planet that have their own investment in their own intentions and agendas. Well, she's very compassionate. And when you have an intention and an agenda that's not very holistic, you have to learn from it. If you've invested in it over so much time, well, you're going to have to learn why. It's almost like the Matrix, the Oracle, saying we can never see past the decisions that we don't understand. And we've all made the right choice, but we can't see past the choices we don't understand. So we have to live them out in order to resolve them. So in essence, part of it is in our unawakened state, we pursue the gratifications of those 7 elements of the false self, and we feel so entitled to them, but the only way we're going to let go of it is when the pain and suffering increases to such a level that you can't run away anymore, and you seek truth. You seek a remedy to the pain that you've tried everything to relieve yourself, and that is awakening. Only seeing clearly resolves the issue, and then you change from the false self to the true self. You start making inroads to transition, and you find you never had a wound.
Right.
In the true self, there is no wound. It's complete and whole. You cannot add to or take away from the perfection that it is. So when we start to see clearly, our pain and suffering leads us to the transition of where we are ignorant enough to continue to hold on to habits and patterns that no longer serves us, no longer helps us in our journey to liberate. So same with the earth. It's going through a process, though it is highly, highly, highly enlightened, and she speaks and she leads all of those who take time to be with her in nature, to open themselves up in the most intimate and vulnerable way, to listen to the silence and hear her voice and move in harmony with her. Now, that doesn't mean we have to be obsessive about how we act on the earth, but we can take steps to stay in tune and in alignment. But remember, the false self, the mind and the ego, it likes bar graphs that have lines that are straight or angled. So it likes to see progress defined in straight line definitions and not meandering ones, which is what true life is about. It's like the sine wave cycle. We gain a little and we fall back, and we gain a little and we fall back, and we slowly enlighten over time. So it's a very graceful process, and this is what I think is important when we're looking at the world as a whole and we see all those problems out there. We gotta remember that point. If everything is perfect, how am I looking at the realities that I see before me in an imperfect way? And how can I move into a greater alignment with the true flow of the galaxy, with the true flow of Mother Earth, the solar system, and this great universal consciousness? That's what I see happening.
Wow. Can we get there being immersed in the, Western civilization? I live in a small town, but it's still in a town. I live in a neighborhood, and I come across the like you mentioned earlier, you're walking down the street, I see that, stuff, and it comes across my computer screen, and I don't have TV, so I don't see it on TV, but I keep tabs on what's going on in the world, and it just seems like in the society that we have right now, the way things are set up, the way we've been programmed, this is definitely not the most conducive setup for spiritual enlightenment and ascension.
But then on another hand, yes, it's greatly set up for it, because provides all the pain and suffering for us to pay attention to what matters most.
I'm a big proponent of the silver lining. I know there's always a silver lining out there. Oh my God, how many people woke up at 911? How many people, actually started asking questions right after 2001? And all these different events that happen in the world, they're all big catalysts for getting people to ask questions. Right.
And there's even merit in the, searching all the websites, staying up on all of the most newest information that's breaking on the cabal and the underground, or the cartels and so on, the New World Order and so on, all that stuff. Well, there comes a point that after hashing and rehashing and prophesying, when the next new incident is going to occur, if you followed it for years and years and years, you see that that's always there. That's a state of mind, and it can be obsessive. It can be it can be like a black hole. You keep wanting more and more of this alternative reality. Yeah, some of it, maybe more than some of it, is true, but there comes a point where, that old adage, that biblical adage, being in the world but not of it, becomes an apropos point in that when we're talking about the unbearable lightness of being, to move to that point in your consciousness, in your meditation, where you're fulfilled, you're in the nothingness, you become an open vessel for the Creator and for the universal consciousness around you. And sometimes it has you act, and then you step back from the act, because if you put your hand into the, if you're like a monkey and put your hand into the jar and you try to fool with it too much, you get caught into that quandary of assistance without interference.
Right.
Now, the Creator has been taking care of the entire universe for more than the billions of years, the 14 billion years of that.
Yeah.
And taking care of all simultaneously, all beings. Well, we have to trust the Creator's view rather than our view and impinge that upon life. So that's why it's really important to, it's good to be abreast of all of these things and possibilities that can and are happening around the world, but also being open, doing what is coming up from your inner core, the heart of your being to act, and then stepping back into that freedom again without attachment becomes the necessary part of the equation, because you can get so entangled in all of what's going on, thinking you're making progress, but all you're doing is adding the projection of your own inner polarities onto the situation. It's better that we take care of our own house and try to make it as clear as possible and act from that kind of clarity and non-attachment without interference. Then we make a greater impact. It's almost like homeopathic stimulation across the whole. It's done in such a healthy way that all of reality starts to react. So I really feel that the more we do to see clearly, the more we change the entire reality. We start hitting reality on a systemic level, and we make it more possible for the next person to really gravitate to that energetic of being free and in that lightness, detached and fulfilled, ready to move, always pregnant with possibilities, but sitting in the middle of action and inaction, sitting in the nothingness and being at peace. Peace is one of the hardest things to find in this world, in this day and age, and it's one of the greatest treasures.
Ramon.
Sorry, I have to unmute my mic there. With the discussion of, our inner treasures and who we really are and how we, come to look at ourselves as more as garbage than a treasure. Because one of the things that, the way we talk to ourselves, usually we wouldn't allow anybody else to talk to us that way. The guards would go up, who are you talking to, like that, But I just find it hilarious how at least, the human conditioning is so willing to accept that they to talk to themselves that way when they wouldn't let anybody else do that. It's like you get the toughest guy and if you listen to the way he talks about himself, it's not that nice. It's not only guys, but everybody in general. And I think that first step is so hard for so many people. And what would you recommend?
That is such an important area That is so great you're bringing this up. You know, like you were saying, you could see the biggest, strongest guy, you know, working out to really, you know, bring those muscles up to the high, shiny caliber. And yet, you know, if you know the buzzwords, where he or she looks at themselves in a negative fashion, you can hit those buzzwords, and boy, they shrink right underneath it, because the negative self-talk is such a prevalent thing. And this area here is especially an insidious one. And when we take the time to ask ourselves, hey, why do I feel that way? Why am I letting this monkey on my back keep beating me in the same way, keep stabbing me in the same wound over and over? Well, track it back is what I say. And that, when I say track it back, I'm meaning going into that neutral observer in a non-polarized way. When you're in that state, where you're not holding any polarity, you're observing in a neutral fashion, you can look and ask that question about, why am I doing this to myself? And we can track those back to certain instances, certain traumas in our life, and certainly our conditioning as we grown up. Our conditioning is trending on the planet now to pay great attention to. I think in our past, just having a meditation methodology was the big thing that was trending, and we've seen that move across the 100th monkey. Well, now trending on the planet is getting rid, or let's just say, starting to question these instances where we are beating ourselves, and where do they come from? So you brought up something that's really important, and I think we can look back in our childhood, and we can look back also societally, culturally, and we can start seeing how elements of it all start to come together. But here's the thing. When we start to look at these things, we find out where it comes from. Mom, dad, teacher, peers, the job environment, so on. And we start to have a person on the end of our pitchfork, so to speak, to blame. Well, that means we haven't looked far enough. We got to look back even further. And what I mean by that is these self-sabotaging belief systems and attitudes we hold on ourselves go back even further. They go back actually to the point when we fell asleep, original sleep, and when we found ourselves in total separation, we began to blame ourselves at that point. And we started at that point, we started to have the reality reflect back to us how I am unworthy, I am, put the slogan in there, unworthy, unfit, unlikable. You can add in all the uns in there. Look at where they come from that perspective, and you start to liberate from them, and you liberate all those who you formerly held as prisoner in judgment or blame that passed it on. No, they were acting only towards the imprint, the template that you have, and you instigated. This is how you feel in total separation when you're sleeping in separation. These are the attitudes you hold against yourself. And this is part of the reason why we can see this great journey of coming into a physical body, being in separation, facing all of these challenges in this life, is to wake up to this very fact, is that I did it to myself. I hold these things against myself for leaving. I feel guilty because I separated from the great unicity and feeling the oneness all over all over my being, and I judge myself. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. We're down to 40 seconds, so let me just give out the website. You're listening to Tom and Ramon on the 100th Monkey Radio Show with Ronald Holt, our special guest for this week. Make sure you check us out, www.100thmonkeyradio.com, and we'll be back after these commercials.
On your way through this hard venture, you will be confronted.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio.
Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free. Only the free can tell the truth, then the truth can set you free.
Welcome back to the 100th Monkey Radio Show with Tom and Ramon and our guest, Ronald Holt. So I asked before what was the first step, and you gave us a great answer. But one of the things I find that can be like a trap is that sometimes people will focus so much attention on clearing out the past and clearing themselves and opening themselves up that they actually end up having the opposite effect, because it's almost like, well, you cleared out so much, and then now in order to clear more you have to get dirty again.
Ramona, is that the whole your mind's so open your brains fell out scenario?
Yeah, but also the same goes with cleaning out yourself. You keep looking for trash.
Yeah, there is a element of being obsessed with healing that one can fall into that conundrum. And so this is why moving into that state in your meditation of the neutral observer and into the nothingness, I think in a general sense, I could say that of the people that I've experienced, the students that I've experienced, inside of workshops, people can get to that neutral observer and that nothingness state, but they don't really understand what's happening there and the great value of being there is. So when we put the aspect of that question that you have, the tendency to always be looking for something. Now, there's an obsessive component, and then there's also another component of being alert. So when you're at the neutral observer, you can feel what it's like to be in the true self, vivacious, clear, centered, detached, fulfilled. And you can walk around with that. You can be that. And you start to begin to observe the dualistic nature, where you're the observer and you're the actor. And the actor gets involved with all these different things and stumbles and trips and gets obsessed and gets angry and so on. When we're observing this dualistic type of aspect, then we see that there is one element of being alert, when we always want to be alert to liberating where we trip and fall. So being alert to that and seeing clearly, using the aspects of seeing clearly to liberate is a very solid and fundamental piece to our spiritual journey. And then seeing where we get obsessive, where we want this healing or that healing, or we just keep pursuing healing. Well, if you can see the difference, then you can rest assured both occur and you're okay. Sometimes it's good to explore some of these other techniques and methodologies of healing and so on. But I think in the end, after you've pursued so many of them, you start to see the false self. That part's always going to be looking for healing and always going to be needing. But when you slip, it's okay to have that aspect and to allow that aspect non-judgmentally, just observe it, and then know that when you step over into the true self, all the healing is already done. There is no mar, there is no wound, there is nothing to heal, because you're in fulfillment and seeing clearly. So the alertness level in that state helps maintain that kind of consciousness, and also helps the transiting between the true self and the false self. When we can transit between the true self and false self with some equilibrium and consciousness, then we form a new relationship, and the false self can start to add and help in our journey as an awakening member of the dualistic component. It's our job to educate this part of ourselves and help it evolve and bring it back, embrace it back into consciousness, because it came from the true self.
Getting to that, a place where you can walk out in the world with, a fair amount of balance. Me personally, I've noticed that it takes repetition into that state. Me personally, I went the meditation route. So there's a lot of different routes. All roads lead to their own thing. But I noted that it does take repetition getting to those states of unity through my consciousness. And every time I went in, every time I came out of those experiences, I felt that I had grown. I felt that I was closer to being able to deal with the world in a much more balanced manner, be able to see it for what it is much clearer. And but the repetition for me was key, getting to that place multiple times.
Absolutely, you said it right on the spot. That's it. Hit the nail on the head.
It's that persistence thing. Right?
The more familiar we are with the changing dynamics and challenges in life, to be able to step across the asana, the condition or the situation we're in, to move into the integrated energy, that really helps. The more familiar, the more easier it becomes. Exactly. And the more you're okay about slipping back and forth between the two.
Right. So we got a question out of the chat room that I figure we throw out there for you and get your views on it. It has to do with entities, both embodied and disembodied, and how they, what's their role in all this? I mean, when I say embodied, I'm talking like, the possession sort of scenarios. And then the disembodies, I actually have had a couple of experiences with some pretty nasty little critters out there in my explorations. So Just curious what their role is in all this.
That's a good question. Certainly all of us on the spiritual path have at one point or another come across some very contentious out-of-body or departed beings. I really feel that these beings help us empower and integrate ourselves. You know, on the first meetings with these beings, we look at it from a completely different context than later on in our spiritual journey. And on the first meeting, we look at it as so us and them, and so polarized. And later on, as we start to look more into ourselves, we look at it from a more integrated perspective, and we start to see also how what works in working with these beings, because when you're in an encounter with them, there's definitely things to learn, and what to do, how to do, all becomes part of the equation. I'm going to share a story. I was in India, and I was at one of the ashrams. And in India, the ashrams, in the rooms that they give you, they're not very clean. So they have a host of things you have to be aware of.
Right.
And we were sleeping on the ground, 4 of us men, basically side by side. And one night there was a guy that he was obviously having a very bad dream, and he was going through the throes, and it woke me up. My higher self said at the time, sit up and get into meditation. I'm going, I'm tired. I'm trying to sleep. Leave me alone. And I tried to go back to sleep, but my higher self kept saying, get up and get into meditation. I'm going, no, I'm trying to sleep. So finally, I realized it's not going to give up. It's going to keep doing that. So I finally got up. I got into meditation. And that guy next to me, he just was going through just a horror. I realized he must be going through an enormously bad nightmare. And then in the middle of the room, this, it was not it was a new moon kind of condition, so there wasn't any real light in the room. So the room was pretty dark. But yet in the middle of the room, there were these dark clouds, enormously dark clouds. I mean, they were so dark, the rest of the room seemed light compared to these clouds. And then out of the clouds came this very hideous being. And luckily I was in meditation, because I was so centered and so calm. I was just observing it like, oh, no big deal. And then my guidance had me just extend my right hand and my index finger and make a spiral motion. So I started doing that in the energetics, in that centered energetic state, and suddenly all the clouds started coming into themselves, and that being, it covered up that being, and then it just swallowed that being, and then it was gone. Mm-hmm. I was like, holy Christ, what was that? And then I just let it go. I felt like I wanted to get back to sleep. So there was an incident of a discarnate, a very hideous looking discarnate, yet it challenged me in my polarity, my level of consciousness at the time, my polarization, and my ability to stay centered and detached from what was arising in the reality. And certainly I think that if we are these magnificence of consciousness, that we have the whole universe waiting for us to liberate from the confines of our own polarizations and dualities and challenges and stuff. Well, we have to be able to meet energies of all sorts. Whatever spectrum of energy it is, we have to be so confident and centered in our own being and aware of our infiniteness, and to be able to handle anything that the reality throws at us in a very centered and integrated fashion. So for me, that was a good experiment in seeing if I would diffractionate and resort to fear and all these other levels of consciousness, which is perfectly okay. They serve as a training to eventually get you to the point of self-empowerment and being able to handle from your heart, from your connection, whatever you face.
Yeah, I had an experience that this was just this last year too. I do astral projection, so I was out and I found myself in a dark room, and I could feel all the entities that were in the shadows. You know, just beyond it was kind of lighted in the center, and I could feel all the entities watching in the shadow, and there were 4 women standing around me, and they were clawing at my shield. Okay, I had this my energetic bubble. They were clawing at this bubble, trying to break through this bubble and get to me. And I simply said, "Be gone." And with the conviction and knowing that it would happen, and they all were yanked back like like stuntmen. You see, they have the cable on them. So they were all yanked back into the shadows in this room, and I at that time I was actually looking into the divine feminine and trying to understand a little deeper the implications of the reemergence of the divine feminine on the planet, the way it's coming right now. And that experience taught me so much about actually seeing that energy and seeing how there is a certain element out there that is, shall we say, I don't want anybody to get me wrong at all. I'm all about, having that balance, the masculine and feminine energy balance on the planet. But there's a certain element out there that's taking this reemergence of the divine feminine to an extreme. And it's creating a hatred in the divine feminine, in the population of the masculine. And so I learned that is also an element out there that I needed to be aware of. So I definitely got an awesome lesson out of the experience myself.
Wow, I really like that story. Thank you for sharing that.
I felt it was absolutely appropriate for the conversation. So
Yeah, that kind of also reminds me of one experience I told you, Tom, about it a while back, and it's how sometimes I would dream with these very beautiful women, and they're kind of like hitting on me on the dream. And I remember one in particular, she's hitting on me, and I'm kind of ignoring her. As I'm ignoring her, then she couldn't hold up the facade anymore, and all of a sudden, like, this beautiful woman looked hideous. Like, her skin was like sucking up and drying up, and it's like she started getting desperate, almost like she needed to feed, so she couldn't keep up the facade. Kind of like something you would see like in the movies.
I think you hit upon something that's really important in that the archetype of what you just expressed, in that getting back to the original question, which is about these discarnates, what role do they play? Well, that's the quintessential element, is what are you going to empower? And certainly in your example that you just gave, you didn't give it any attention, and it started to reveal what it really was, and it started to fall apart. So many of these things subsist on the energy that you're giving it. And in the other cases where we were just talking about, once you stay nice and centered and you're fully believing in yourself and not giving any energy out to whatever these crystallizations of fear or neediness or whatever, when you speak from the fullness of your being or emptiness of your being, then it's like a power that cannot be dismissed. They cannot respond to it. They have to go back where they came from, because they have no real power on themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just surprising, and it's happened to me a few times. And there was another case where I was on a train, here in Japan and even in New York City. I love sitting on the train to meditate. And there was one particular where in my third eye I see this face, and it was like a face smiling at me. It was like a beautiful girl, and then again, like this hand just reached out and like grabbed her by the face and snatched her away. And then I remember telling Tom that story. I don't know if you remember, Tom, and it was like, oh, that's your guides doing their job.
Yep.
Interesting.
So anyway, the whole point is, because I don't want people to get lost with what we were talking about. It's, we have our own power, and if you decide to give it away, then you make those entities that are attacking you, or even, in 3D life, the bullies and stuff like that attacking you, you make them stronger. So when I realized that when, like Tom, or in your case, we just say no or just stand up to it without hate or any aggression, it actually goes away. But I've had a situation where I will confront it, but with aggression and hate, and it just becomes like almost like they become like sticky. I don't know how to explain it, where there was one situation where I was in an out-of-body experience and I was being attacked by these spirits, and every time I would attack them back, I would lose the sight of vision. And it was such a clear message, like when you're acting in anger, you're not seeing.
You start losing the clarity. You start losing detachment. And in that detachment, that we could call that unbearable lightness of being, you're fully empowered. You're the seed within the seed that constantly fills itself. But when you act out of any of those emotions, that's basically saying that you disbelieve in that fullness and integratedness of your being. So it's actually just a nice little exercise to help regain stability and balance in your detachment and understanding when facing some of these things. And certainly all of us have had those challenges. Yeah. I remember being, in my bed sometimes and feeling like I can't move, and feeling, the first reaction is to, elicit the fear that comes from that. What am I going to do because I can't move? Can I breathe? And then all of a sudden you suddenly can't breathe, and it promulgates itself, and you wind up slipping down further and further until you wake out, until you realize the fullness of your being, and you surrender.
Yeah.
So we just got a little over 3 minutes left, Ron. This has gone really well and really fast.
It has gone fast.
Yes, it has.
Oh my God!
Time flies when time is such a fickle thing.
Really quickly, I was watching Star Trek. I'm sorry, I have to bring up Star Trek again. Which one was it? Was it Insurrection? Anyway, there's a point where like Captain Picard and this girl were, she's been living on this planet that this planet, actually makes them live longer, and she kind of learned how to stop time, and he like held her hand, and they were, like falling for each other, and then she was able to stop time. And at another point, she then later in the movie, she was injured and she was bleeding out. So he was like, "Can you stop time? Can you stop time?" And then he did it himself, and just slowing down the time to see everything. And the reason why I bring this up, because I kind of feel that this goes along the same line that we were talking about, is when we're looking at our own power, then, because we're enjoying each other's company, that's why I think the time is flying. But the awareness we give to things, does that make any sense?
Yeah, actually, it really does. The awareness and consciousness where we're, all the boundaries come down. You feel so centered and fulfilled that you start to move, when you're in the company of beings that you feel that comfortable with, you start to move into the no time. You move into the nothingness, and time just dissipates so quickly, and you actually kind of stop time by the enjoyment that you're having with each other. Sharing of consciousness leads to the multidimensionality of our capability.
and that time is diminishing rapidly on our show. So, Ron, share with our listeners out there where they can check out your material and stuff again, if you would, please.
Alrighty, thank you for that. Our website is www.solischool.org, SOLISCHOOL.org, solischool.org. And my wife's is www.isaroyal.com. We both share the Soli School website, and we both do workshops together, but as you know, she's been in this business for a long time, and she's quite an adept in her field, and she's certainly worth listening to also, or reading her material. Very empowering, very liberating. And also our workshop.
Thanks so much for joining us. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
Yell it out, come on. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.
Got one thing to tell you, I've got to say.